Okay, welcome to the stream, ladies and gentlemen. And in today's video, we're going to talk about how the EU Commissioner is absolutely raging. In fact, a lot of the EU leaders are raging at the moment with Hungary's new plans of what they are going to do. Now, before we even go into all that, there's a lot to cover today. This weekend's news has been pretty wild and pretty intense. I've firstly got to mention the whole Trump situation. I won't use the keyword on the platform, or my video will get hit and censored right away. But I will talk about a couple of points on that later in the video, depending on how much time we've got. Because there's a few things that are a little bit weird about this, yet again, just like there were with when it happened the last time. So I'll touch upon that. But I know people will say, Neil, why aren't you covering the biggest story? Loads of people have already covered it. It's already been out for a day, and there's tons and tons of news. And if I cover it, I might get censored. So I'll touch upon it a little bit later on. But I want to begin today with what's going on with the EU, and let's have a look at what Hungary has threatened. The EU is vowing retaliation if Hungary sends buses of migrants to Brussels. Now, we remember what happened when Ron DeSantis of Florida did this. I think he sent them to Martha's Vineyard and some other places. We remember that situation. So it's actually a pretty good tactic that Hungary is looking to use here, because they saw what happened and the effectiveness with Florida doing it. So this will be quite interesting to see. But let's pick up on the story here then. Hungary's threat to send a bus convoy, so not just one, but this is a convoy of migrants to Brussels in protest against the EU policies, is unacceptable, is what the EU is saying, and it will prompt EU retaliatory action, the bloc's powerful executive branch warned on Tuesday. Hungary's anti-migrant government signaled last week that it's serious about giving migrants free one-way travel to Brussels, a measure meant to pressure the EU into dropping heavy fines imposed on Hungary. This is over its restrictive policies that they have. In June, the EU Court of Justice ordered Hungary to pay a fine of 200 million euros for persistently breaking the bloc's asylum rules, and an additional 1 million euros per day until it brings policies into line with EU law. The government in Budapest is delaying this payment. Now, it raises a question right away. Why is Hungary not looking to leave the EU? That's what the UK did. The UK did Brexit. Not that it really helped. If you remember the whole thing around Brexit, I remember it quite well. Some of the biggest policies that were being run at the time were, this will stop migration into the UK. That's what they ran on, one of the biggest things. And that the EU wouldn't have as much influence over the country, and Brexit, everything else. That didn't really happen. If you think about it, the EU still got very heavy influence over the UK. The migration stuff didn't stop as it was supposed to. And the new government, the Labour government, don't seem to be... well, we'll talk about that in a second, because he's just met with Moroni from Italy. And let's come back onto this a second. In June, let's move on to this part. Asked about Hungary's plan, Commission spokeswoman said, do you know what? They always say spokespeople, but then it says spokeswoman here. That's interesting. Said it's unacceptable. This action, if carried out, would be in clear breach of the EU law, but it would also be in clear breach of the principles of sincere and loyal cooperation. This is what she said. Well, really, I wouldn't say that's cooperation to dump all of the people into Hungary, but also of mutual trust. The Commission has its headquarters in the Belgian capital, so they do not want Hungary to send these bus loads. It's fine for them to say that Hungary have to take all of the people, but if you try and send them to Brussels, they've got a different opinion. Hungary is also preparing to sue the EU to reimburse border control expenses. Hungary said they've spent 2 billion euros on border controls since the onset of the crisis. Hungary will seek reimbursement of border police costs from the EU and is even prepared to file a lawsuit to this end. Hungarian cabinet minister Gergely Gulyás said at the weekend, the weekly government press briefing, "We will also demand reimbursement of border policing costs from the Commission during the negotiations. The Ministry of Justice is also conducting preparatory work here. We want to receive these costs from the Commission by legal means, so we are even prepared to sue the European Commission," said Gulyás. The government has made a mandate to the Minister for EU Affairs to negotiate with the European Commission on the judgment condemning Hungary over migration. And then he actually gave a short interview and talked about all of this just 3 days ago now. So this was interesting. So the EU is raging after Hungary's threat. This is out of remix here. Here we go. Here's the statement.
The announcements made by the Hungarian authorities that they would transport irregular migrants.
See, this is the new buzzword as well. It's irregular migrants now. They don't call them illegal migrants. And the other thing that's interesting about this is that they're starting, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the charts on illegal migration, you've got immigration, emigration, you've got illegal migration. They kind of merge it all together. But now they are fudging the numbers because they have a category for illegal migration, but now they've created this new category for irregular migration. And because they're saying that it's not illegal migration, even though it is, they've just changed the word, they're saying that they're not including it into the figures. So it's very frustrating, especially for economists and people trying to measure all this and inform people on it, because you look like you're not telling the truth with the figures because the government's changed the wording, even though it's the same thing. It's the most bizarre. It's the most bizarre thing.
From the Hungarian-Serbian borders to Brussels, in one word, basically, it is unacceptable.
So it's unacceptable for them to do it. Okay, here we go.
To use all our powers under the treaty to ensure that the EU law is respected. If carried out, would be in clear breach of the EU law, but also it will be in clear breach of the principle of sincere and loyal cooperation, but also of the mutual trust. In addition, it will also undermine the security of the Schengen area as a whole.
So she's openly admitting that it will undermine the security of the Schengen area. I wonder if they actually think through what they're saying sometimes. Gulyás reiterated a threat that Hungary will send these buses. "We will continue to protect the borders from migrants. They will not enter Europe through Hungary and through the southern border of Schengen. Those who receive political asylum under the rule of law procedure in accordance with EU rules and on the basis of their voluntary decision are offered a one-way free trip to Brussels. The government will demand reimbursement on border police." He also reminded them in 2015, the Hungarian Prime Minister warned that if Brussels does not enforce community law, the Schengen Agreement, and does not oblige member states protecting their external borders to effectively protect their borders, Schengen will collapse. I don't think he's too far off, actually, because we're getting there now. And we also had, there's another really interesting one about, oh yeah, this was it. We'll come to another part on this in a moment. One of the ladies has done a massive U-turn who was all for this. So Sweden's now looking to pay migrants who failed to integrate nearly 31,000 euros to return home, even those with citizenship. They described the plan as a paradigm shift in the Scandinavian countries' migration policy. Sweden has announced plans to pay migrants 350,000 SEK or almost 31,000 euros return to their home voluntarily. They said even if they've got Swedish citizenship, they'll still be eligible. I think a fair amount will probably go home with 31,000. That's a lot of money in some places like Afghanistan and some of the other countries. Forsell, whose appointment was backed by the right-wing Sweden Democrats who influence government policy, said upon starting his new role that the government must commit to remigration and abandon the open borders policies of the previous Liberal administrations. The important thing now is that we should not return to the previous policy, which after all put Sweden in a very difficult situation. A lot of people were affected by it. Yeah, the situation was, if you look at the stats, which you couldn't even put out there because your videos get taken down, it was all around crime and gangs. And you ask a lot of Swedish people, in fact, I know a lot of Swedish people are subscribers here, please leave a comment, because you'll see that people have said that Sweden's become very, very dangerous country. It used to be one of the safest in the EU, and now there's a lot of danger, a lot of crime there because of the gangs. I'm not talking about, people seeking refugee status. That's obviously not what we're talking about here. We're talking about these gangs that come across and use these open border policies to set up these criminal entities in different countries within the EU. And this is what's now led to this crisis that we have, this crime wave. Now, this was Louise Meijer. When the large wave of refugees came to Sweden in 2015, I took a stand for openness and refugees welcome, but I've changed my mind. Now I represent an even stricter migration policy than the one I opposed at the time. I think that's very interesting that has come about, because we are starting to see people now doing a U-turn on their views here. Last month, Stockholm announced that for the first time in 50 years, the country had seen net emigration over the last 12 months, although these figures have been contested by some groups. Let's see. Okay, let's see what else we want to cover. Let's just cover Starmer then. He's sort of showing this great interest in the Albania migrant deal, says Maloney at the moment. Obviously, his sort of right-wing Labour backbenchers are not happy about this at all. But he's saying that he's looking at all options to solve the crisis. So what did Maloney say? She told a press conference in Rome that she and Sir Keir had signed a joint declaration including tangible, important points on migration. Referring to her country's Albanian deal, she said the UK government has shown great interest in this agreement. Last year, Italy agreed to open 2 migrant processing centres in the Balkan nation, where the claims of 36,000 migrants will be processed each year. The government has insisted it is different from the Rwanda plan it abandoned in July. Interesting. So they didn't want to do the Rwanda plan, but now he's showing great interest in the Albania plan. He said this: "You've made remarkable progress working with countries along migration routes as equals to address the drivers of migration at source and to tackle the gangs." Again, this is what the focus is on. It's not on refugee status, which a lot of people are confusing. It is on these gangs. This is the problem. And as a result, irregular visitors, again, illegal arrivals to Italy by sea are down 60% since 2022, Starmer said. "I'm pleased that we're deepening our cooperation here." Now, let's just move on to, I will talk a little bit on this Trump situation then, without using any of the keywords here, because you probably all know what's been going on. I don't need to fill you in on everything that's taken place over the last 24 hours. I'm pretty sure you know by now. A couple of things I found strange about the situation then was, and I made 3 points really. So number one, how on earth did this guy know where Trump was? That's the first thing that I found really bizarre, because even CNN, I think I grabbed the article, even CNN said Trump's golf outing was a last-minute decision, sources say. So if it's a last-minute decision and Also, Ukraine has straight away denied all these links to this delusional Trump suspect, but that's not true. I pulled up all of the articles here and all of the links to all of the papers, all of these media sources. So there's loads of these media sources that quote that he was a sourcer, a recruiter for the Ukrainian foreign military. Not that I think people are putting too much focus on this aspect. They're sort of saying, "Oh, look, see, this is Ukraine. This is why." I think people are just upset and they're linking things that there's a very loose link there. So the link now that people are saying, I've been reading all these articles, is somehow Ukraine is behind this. I don't think so. I think this is a crazy guy. He obviously was on some sort of ego trip. He was trying to do all this recruitment. He tried to serve himself. He wasn't allowed. He was too old. He went and did all this recruitment. He started setting up these walls with all flags, and he was getting really intense about it all. That's what I think's happened. He was just a weirdo. He's a weird guy. He saw all the publicity that other guy, Crooks, got, and he thought, well, I fancy a little bit of that. That's genuinely what I think. I'm just looking at it logically. Yeah, there's all these theories around other stuff, but again, I'm not seeing these links yet. I mean, feel free to leave a comment if you think there's something I should see. But these are the main points I'm looking at logically. How did he know where Trump would be? That doesn't make any sense. That's strange. How did he get close enough to take a shot as well? That's another strange thing. I know how big this golf course was, but he got within 300 to 400 meters. Now, 300 to 400 meters with an AK-47 is actually quite a difficult shot to try and get that accurately, but it's doable if you've got military training or you've got rifle training. You could do it. Even when I did my basic training in the army, we shot to 300 meters, and then I only shot further than that with specialist training. So yeah, it's doable. Secret Service fired multiple shots, minimum of 4 shots. None of them hit him. I thought that was interesting as well, that none of those shots hit him, but he had a lot of body armor and stuff like that. But I think the whole thing yet again is a bit weird. It just seems strange. I just think more of these situations are going to occur. I really do, because you're seeing all the rhetoric now, and you're seeing how even on the debate last week, how all the rhetoric around that. I just think this is going to keep going. And it is concerning. I think it is really concerning how all of this is going. I don't know how you feel about it. Drop a comment below. But this just plays into everything we've been talking about for the last few years since 2020, which we talked about through to 2027 is the peak, and 2030. I just think this is going to continue. We're going to have a lot of issues around this. We are seeing a lot of breakdown in law and order. I think it's going to get worse before it finally gets better. I think it's starting to get better in certain places where we're seeing the votes change. We are seeing certain parties coming into power that weren't into power before. And I think eventually it's going to go too far, and then we'll see a tipping point, and then it will balance out. But we've still got a long way to go yet before we get there. But those are really my thoughts on today. There's a couple of other big stories I want to cover, but we'll probably touch upon those tomorrow and through the week, depending on how they develop. So that's it for today. Thank you for being online. Take care. God bless, and I'll see you tomorrow.